Welcome to World Kitchen, where we explore global cuisine, cultures, and traditions from guest chefs in the WPSU family. Our friends and neighbors from around the block, across town, and all over central Pennsylvania offer you a ticket to create and experience the world through a common love of food. Pack your bags and your appetite because our kitchen circles the globe. This is WPSU's World Kitchen. Let's travel to Palestine with Lizette Garcia, who'll be making her Middle Eastern tabbouleh salad. Next, we head to Poland with Renata Engel, who shares a family tradition, pierogis. And we'll finish with a sweet delight from Persia, baklavah from our World Kitchen host. Please welcome Tamra Fatemi Badi.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of World Kitchen. I am Tamra Fatemi Badi, and we are so happy you've joined us here in the Dr. Keiko Miwa Ross WPSU production studios, or as a part of our online audience. We have a great evening of cuisine and culture ahead of us, so are you ready to welcome our guest chefs? Thanks so much. So let's hear it for Lizette Garcia and Renata Engel. Renata will be making pierogies using a family recipe passed down for generations. We'll see her do that in just a little while, but right now she's going to go backstage where our volunteers are with our caterer, Sean Carter, from Carter's Table, and he's prepared samples for you to all enjoy this evening, and so our volunteers will be bringing those out between chefs. Now, on to our first dish of the evening. Lizette, what are you going to make for us?
Well, I'm going to be making a Middle Eastern salad called tabbouleh. Thanks.
Great. All right, let's do this.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. It's exciting to be here with you tonight. This is my first time cooking live, so fingers crossed that it turns out okay. So the dish that I'm going to be making tonight is a salad, and then by a show of hands, how many folks have had tabbouleh? Okay, good number. So hopefully mine lives up to the ones that you've already had. It's an old family recipe, actually, passed down through generations from my grandmother to my mom, now to me, and hopefully to the next generation after me. I'm going to start, actually, by taking the bulgur wheat and putting that in some water because it takes a little bit of time for it to reconstitute itself. So it's dry and you have to soak it so that it gets soft so that when you eat it, it's actually the right consistency for the salad. And today I'm using the extra fine bulgur, and there's lots of different grains of bulgur. So there's extra fine, there's medium, there's coarse. There's lots of different ones, and you can actually pick whichever one you want. I think for tabbouleh salad, it's best to use extra fine or fine. But if you like the taste of the wheat and you want it to be like a little bit more in your salad, then I would recommend using the medium grain because then you'll actually taste the flavor more of the wheat in your salad. So I'm gonna start, and I'm just gonna spill a little bit here on the countertop, but
that's good luck, right? Spilling a little is good luck.
Yeah, it's good luck. So I'm not actually going to measure it out. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. But if you were following the recipe, it's about a half a cup. And you would take it and just put it in a dish. And because you're using the in this case, the extra fine or the fine normally, you don't need to worry about using boiling water to rehydrate it. You can use just regular tap water. Doesn't have to be super hot in order for it to get hydrated. So I'm just gonna put it over here so I don't spill it, and then grab my pitcher of water. And I'm just gonna add water, and hopefully you can see this. I think there's a camera above me, so hopefully you can see. You just add water to kind of cover the dry bulgur that's in there. So hopefully you all can see that. And I'm gonna just set it aside to soak up the water and get soft. And while that's getting ready, I'm gonna take the parsley. So how many folks have bought a bunch of parsley at the store? Okay, lots of people. Do you know the difference between curly and flat? Yes, okay, so for this recipe, you actually have to use curly. Can't use flat, it won't work with flat parsley. And what you do, I've got some separated here. After you wash it, you actually have to take the parsley like off of the stem, right? So because the stem in your tabbouleh would not taste very good, you really just want the leaf. So after you wash it, and you have to wash it because it's generally pretty dirty when it comes from the grocery store. So you just, pop the top of the parsley off, and then you can throw the stems away. And because I am a semi-homemade chef, that's how I like to refer to myself, I'm not going to actually hand chop it. I don't know. Do you hand chop it when you cook it?
Sometimes I do if I'm trying to show off, but generally I'll use a food processor. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to just put it into my food processor because that'll make the process go much quicker. And of course, when I learned to make this, and when my grandmother would make it and my mom would make it, the food processor was like a no. But it definitely saves time and makes it much easier for you to be able to get through all of the different parts of the recipe. So I just put some into the food processor, give it a couple whirls. Got some that's getting stuck right here, so I'll just move it over. And you want it to be pretty fine in the chop. You don't want it to be like still too whole. You want it to be pretty chopped up. So this looks about good. I think folks can see it, and they can see it on the TV. It looks about good. And then what we're going to do is I've got this bowl here, and I'm going to take what's already chopped and put it into my bowl, and then I'm going to keep going. And so you can imagine if you were doing this by hand, how much fun it would be.
So Lizette, can you tell us a little bit about what the difference is in the flat and curly? Why is the curly leaf important for this?
That's a great question. I don't actually know other than texture.
That's what I was going to say. I assumed it was the texture because the flat gets a little
mushy,
almost slimy and mushy. Yeah, but the curly leaf holds up better.
Yeah, after you chop the curly, it still has a good texture to it. Whereas, and you'll see kind of because mint sort of mimics flat parsley, so you'll see the difference between when we chop the mint and when you chop this, that this still sort of has this good texture that is good for salad and absorbs the liquid well, right? So I think one of the things that you want to make sure is that, you don't over chop things so that it just becomes like a pot of mush. You want it to be a little bit chunky, and this would just hold the texture better. So the other thing that I do in my tabbouleh that not everybody does. So that's the interesting thing about tabbouleh is that there are lots of different versions of it from lots of different countries in the Middle East. I add cucumber to mine because I think it gives it a nice crunch and like it's a different flavor that gets incorporated into the tabbouleh, but not everybody does, right? So I think it just adds extra flavor and it makes it taste better. I'll talk a little bit about the mint too because I don't generally put mint in my tabbouleh, but in most places where you've tried tabbouleh, it probably has had mint in it. And I think it's just a different flavor. It's a preference, right, whether you want the mint in it or not. And the reason why I don't do it is because my grandmother didn't do it. And so because my grandmother didn't do it, my mom didn't do it, and so I don't do it, right? So, I mean, that's just sort of how family recipes work, right? All right. So in addition to the parsley and the cucumber, I also add onion to my tabbouleh. And when you see most recipes for tabbouleh, it's like green onion that they use, so like the long skinny onion. But guess what? My mom didn't like the green onion, so we don't actually do green onion in ours, but we do use onion. So I had just a regular white onion here, and I'm gonna, I sort of prepped it a little bit before we started and peeled it, and I'm just gonna kind of chop it up a little bit. I'm not going to chop too much because backstage it made me cry. Uh-oh. Power. So you want to just kind of chop it pretty coarsely. The thing that I like about tabbouleh is that, it's a great salad. It's easy to make. It's really refreshing. So on a warm summer day, it's easy to kind of whip it up, and you could eat it, for lunch. You could also have it for dinner. Generally, it makes enough where you'll have leftovers for the next day. I mean, it's just such an easy dish to make and is quite refreshing. So just chop up a little bit of onion. And like I said, I don't know if you can see, I didn't really chop it very finely. It's just, pretty big chunks of onion. And I'm going to just drop it into our bowl.
How long would this keep in the refrigerator?
Well, if it lasts because you haven't eaten it all, right. I'd say probably about 3 days. After 3 days, yeah. But generally, it's gone before then. And then I like to use Roma tomatoes instead of like the round beefsteak tomatoes that some folks will use. Again, this is a texture issue, so Roma tomatoes tend to have a better texture, and they tend to hold their texture better. They also tend to be juicier, right? So when you're thinking about salad and you think about dressing and you think about, it needs to have a little bit of liquid, I like for that liquid to come from the tomatoes instead of adding liquid in some other form other than lemon juice, right? So it's nice to be able to use a tomato that is going to produce that liquid. So just, chop a couple up. Again, it's meant to be like a chunky salad, so you don't want to cut your pieces up too small, especially of the tomato, because you want it to be seen in the salad. You want it, to kind of pop out. It adds nice flavor. It also adds nice color to the salad because the onion is more or less the same color as the wheat. And then the cucumber and the parsley are both green. And in the magic of TV, I've pre-chopped some tomatoes, so I'll probably just do the half of the tomato. I was having an interesting conversation with Renata backstage, and we were talking about getting ready for today, and we were talking about our family recipes. And, you may have noticed that my last name is a Spanish surname, right? So Lizette Garcia. And everybody says, well, how do you know how to cook Arabic food? Why are you making Arabic food? And so I shared with Renata, and I'll share with y'all that it's a very interesting fact. So my grandparents were from Palestine, and they immigrated to Central America, to Honduras, which is where my mom was born and raised. And so everybody in my family speaks Spanish, and we eat Arabic food. So it's really interesting. And then my mom came to the United States, in her 20s, and met my dad, who had immigrated to the United States from Cuba. So, everyone's like, oh, you're going to cook something Cuban? And I'm like, no, I'm going to cook some Arabic food. Because, my mom is the one who taught me how to cook, and so she cooked Arabic food. And so I know all kinds of different Arabic food recipes, but I know very little about cooking Cuban food. Although I can make, chicken and rice, and I can make black beans and rice. They're sort of like the staple, but I'm significantly better cooking Arabic food. So you're just going to chop up the cucumber. Again, kind of chunky. You want to be able to taste it in each bite that you take. So I'll actually do both halves of this one. The other question I get is, how can you cook with those nails? And I'm like, practice. It takes practice. So chop up the cucumber. Then we're going to mix it up a little bit and see what it looks like to see if we need more of anything, right? So once you got everything chopped up, I don't know how we're doing on time.
Fine.
We're good? Okay. Take a spoon. I'm going to just mix it up and kind of see how it's going. Now, the beautiful thing about this kind of salad is that you can adjust all of the ingredients based on what you like. So if you like more tomato or more cucumber, you can just add that. If you like more parsley, you can add more parsley. I think I'm going to add a little bit more parsley because I think it needs a little.
It's a really beautiful, colorful salad as well.
Yes.
But I think you're right. I think with tabbouleh, the special thing about it is the freshness. It just tastes like fresh summer.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And it looks like our studio audience guests are soon going to be getting their samples.
Yeah, looking
Yeah.
good. Oh no, I can't get the lid off. All right. All right, so I'm going to add this last batch of parsley in. And I think we're ready to add the wheat. So remember earlier I put the wheat in some water, and you can kind of see now it's hydrated a little bit. It hasn't soaked up all the water yet, so it's still not quite ready, but sort of in anticipation of that, I did some earlier, so we don't have to wait for it. And so I'm just gonna add some in. And it's kind of like I just did with the chopped vegetables. I'm gonna add about half of what I had prepared in, and then kind of see what it looks like. And again, based on your taste, you could add more wheat, you could add more parsley, you could add more cucumber or onion. So I think it's looking pretty good salad-wise, right? So I think you all can see it's looking pretty good salad-wise. And now we're ready to dress it, which will be really easy. It's like one of the easiest things ever. So I'm gonna take my spoon out. Is it open already?
Oh, sorry, it's not
No.
open there.
So I'm gonna just use the same spoon I was using to stir. And so I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons for now of the olive oil. And then I'm gonna mix it up. And then I am going to juice a lemon and see. So, and a couple other tricks to the tabbouleh. If you like your tabbouleh to be on the drier side and don't like as much dressing, you don't have to do 2 lemons. I usually do 2 lemons because I like it on the dressier side. You could also, some folks will drain the tomatoes before they put the tomatoes in the bowl. So that way, like the juice that comes off of the tomatoes doesn't get included in the salad. So you could do that too if you like it a little bit drier. But I like it to be very well dressed. So I like to do that. And then I'm gonna steal the salt. Thank you so much.
Do you need another lemon?
I think I may, but we're gonna see. And salt is a tricky thing because here I am, you see me, I didn't even look. I'm just, I go around, I give it a little coat. And it's basically salt to taste, right? So again, everybody has a different preference for how much salt they like. And you'll notice, you may have not had tabbouleh this way before, but you're being served the tabbouleh with a piece of romaine lettuce. And that is because that's how my grandmother did it. And so when I was younger, and like most kids didn't like to eat my vegetables, my mom and my grandmother would serve me my tabbouleh in a romaine lettuce leaf in a little salad boat. And that's the way that I ate it growing up. So I'm going to fill up a few salad boats here. And please, by all means, if you have it already, taste it. Let me know how it is. The cucumbers, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes
great.
a difference. I'll do
That's
one
beautiful,
more.
and it's so quick and easy and fresh. It seems like a great summer salad.
Yep.
Obviously here in the States, we can get these ingredients year round, so you can make it year round, but it feels like a really good summer salad.
It is. I think it's a wonderful summer salad, and like I was saying before, it's just quite refreshing. Like there's nothing really heavy about it. It's just very light, and usually you serve it chilled, so it's a little bit cool, and so it's just the perfect thing to eat on a warm summer day.
So if you were going to put the mint in, you would do that before?
Yeah. Yes. So thank you for that reminder. See, I forgot because I don't cook with it, right? But if you were going to put mint in it, and I can, you would take probably 5 or 6 leaves from the mint, and this mint comes from Tamra's garden, so it's nice and fresh. So I've got 5 leaves here, and I'm going to just chop those up. I'm going to move that back. And it's sort of the same thing. You want to chop it finely.
Is everyone enjoying it? Yeah? The one you have in it would have mint in it.
Yes, it does. I talked to Sean about it. It does have the mint in it, so you'll be able to taste it.
Yeah.
It's like a quite light taste, I would say. The mint is not overpowering, so it's very light. It just adds that extra sort of burst of freshness, right, if you think about fresh mint. And I would say if you're going to add the mint, you should use fresh mint and not dried mint. Sometimes when you see a recipe, it'll have the dried mint, but I think it's much better with the fresh mint.
Yeah, and again, in the summer, I planted mine, a month ago, and it's just gone crazy already. And that's another hint. If you grow mint, it will take over your entire garden. So I keep mine in a container on the deck. So watch it if you're growing mint.
Yeah. So I'm going to do one more boat maybe with the mint version.
I think I would want the big leaf, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to give you this
do that
one.
and make a whole lunch of it.
I'm giving you this one.
Oh.
We don't have a little plate. You want to try it?
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to take this little one, and we're going to try it.
All right.
So hopefully it's good.
I love the lemon. The lemon really makes it. It's delicious.
It's pretty tasty if I say so myself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope everybody enjoyed their tabbouleh and learned a little bit about how to make it and different varieties and variations and ways that you can sort of zhuzh it up for your own personal tastes.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We are going to reset here real quickly, and then we'll be bringing Renata out to show us how to do her family's pierogies. All right. So the tabbouleh salad has been a wonderful first course. And at WPSU World Kitchen, we have traveled around the globe to more than 20 episodes, where we have celebrated cultures and made dishes from Peru, Japan, Thailand, New Orleans, Nigeria, Mexico, Tunisia, and more. You can find these episodes and the recipes by visiting wpsu.org/worldkitchen. Now, we are going to get ready to bring out our next chef, and so let's tidy up a bit, and then we will bring out Renata Engel. Let me pull these apart here. Yep. Yeah, if anyone has any questions while we are resetting here, Tony has a mic and she can come out to you. Okay.
I was just wondering why you needed to use curly parsley versus flat.
So the question was, why did they use curly parsley versus flat?
Okay, it was about the texture of the curly parsley. It holds up better and it has a firmer texture, especially when you're chopping it or cutting it. If you use the flat leaf parsley, it gets a little soggy and sometimes even a little slimy, I think. So, it just helps to use one that stays a little firmer.
Okay, we have another question here.
I was wondering if you could use curly kale instead of parsley if you like that flavor better.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it would be a very different flavor, but I think it's a possibility. So we have Renata coming out to help us and show us how to make her family recipe pierogies.
Thank you, Tamara. It's really great to be here with all of you today. What I'm going to do is, as I sort of set things up here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my family and a little bit about the history of pierogies in our house. Now, many of you probably have made pierogies or have eaten pierogies. I'm guessing, I'm looking for my pots. I'm thinking that when you might have tasted pierogies or eaten them before, they could have been filled with a lot of different things. And my family always filled them with what I'm going to share with you today is dry curd cottage cheese, which I realize is a little unusual, and a prune separate. So one batch, the one and one batch. So I'm going to talk to you about both of those. And one time somebody asked me the question. They said, "Why did you never have the ones that are stuffed with potato and sauerkraut or cabbage and other things?" And I said, "Well, because I never knew that's what other people ate." You only know what you know, right, in terms of what you're used to eating. So I didn't realize that there were other types of pierogies out there until I was probably in my 20s or 30s. And so these are the pierogies that I grew up with, and they're the pierogi recipe that I'm going to share with you today. So I have some stuff sort of pre-prepared, but I'm going to save the one thing that I really want to show you how I do this is the dough, is making the dough. So let me start with just making the filling. So what I have here is a tablespoon of butter that's already been melted, so just melted butter. Now I'm going to mix in dry curd cottage cheese. Now many of you probably have not heard of dry curd cottage cheese. Some of you may have. But dry curd cottage cheese is really cottage cheese that just is dry. So if you can't find dry curd cottage cheese, you can always just get regular cottage cheese and just strain it, and that'll be fine. So I have about 3/4 of a cup here, and so I'm going to mix that with the butter. And I'm going to use an egg yolk. Egg yolk adds a little bit of moisture, but it helps to also bind the cottage cheese together. So I'm going to add in an egg yolk, and let me break that here and separate that. If you have a large egg, you may reduce the amount of water that you're going to use. Otherwise, you can just use the egg, depending on how much liquid you have. All right, and so I have the cottage cheese, the egg yolk, a little bit of butter. And I use a pinch of salt in this and a little bit of pepper. And when you make this, you can use fresh parsley or dry parsley. Either's fine, because it's going to be cooked in this mixture. Tamara, one thing I didn't do was I didn't bring out my little cup of water, and I need just a couple tablespoons of water. So I'm going to... Water. Do we have? Oh, that's perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll just judge a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is just judge how much mixture, well, not to add in here, but for the dough. I'm going to just judge how thick, how liquid this is. And you might want to smash up some of the curds if it looks a little too liquidy. But that's generally what you need for the filling. Now I'm going to put this aside. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just turn and talk for a minute about the prune filling. So the prune filling is prunes, just bag of prunes, canister of prunes, and you just put them on the stove with a little bit of water and cook them down. Just let them boil. They get soft pretty fast. Don't walk away from the pot because they could burn. I always put in a little bit of salt and a little bit of clove or cinnamon. It just adds a little bit of a nice flavor to it. And the consistency is like this. So it's not, it's got a nice consistency to it. It's a good filling. And so I just brought a little bit here. I cooked these down last night to make a batch of prune pierogies last night. My husband and I ate a full batch of pierogies last night because we went through everything. So that's the prune filling. I'm just going to stuff them with cheese today to show you this. But let me start then with the dough, because the dough is really the interesting thing, and I think a lot of people like to know about what do you do with the dough. So the dough is pretty basic. It's flour. I use a cup of flour, and to that I add one egg, and you can add a whole egg here. So add a whole egg, make sure I'm there. And then, again, pinch of salt. And I just mix this. I mix the flour and the egg. You can mix it with your hands. You will see me mix this with my hands. Just until it gets about this kind of consistency. I don't want to add water until I get that egg in there, because I like to judge how wet this is going to be. Then I add usually 3 to 4 tablespoons of water. And so I'll just judge a little bit here about what that could look like. It's probably what it is. And if not, add a little bit more. You can always add a little bit more flour. And when I make this, the important thing is don't look at it and think, oh, I need more water right away. Mix it as best you can with a fork just to incorporate those ingredients. And then you're going to just start to work with your hands. Now what I've done here is I brought in my flour, and I'm going to very generously flour my surface, my cutting board surface. And I think, let's see where that camera is. Can the camera see this surface if it goes overhead? If not, I can move it over. But then I start to work with my hands. And what I'm going to show you here is the way this dough will come together is it will be sticky at first, and just keep working it. Now there's little pieces down in the bottom of the bowl. Those in the audience, can you see? And I guess I'm looking to see what all you can see. Okay, you're good. So you can see those little pieces there. They can feel kind of gritty when you're first putting this in. Don't stop working the dough. Just keep working those pieces in. And you're kind of kneading it as you do this. I can see my mother's hands doing this. My mother had tiny hands. My mother was very small. And some of her recipes, of course, were all in her head. So when she would tell me what they were, she'd say, use a handful. Yeah, her hands were like this big. There's my mother on her wedding day, Margaret Gabadlo. And she is beautiful, and beautiful inside and out. Just a marvelous person and a fabulous, fabulous cook and baker. And so I learned a lot from her, and this is one of those recipes. Now, I'm going to tell you that my 2 sisters, my brother, do not know how to make pierogies. They don't make them. Well, I shouldn't say they don't know how. They don't make them, okay? But I do try to convince them to do that. And I am so glad that our chef that prepared the recipe for you now has my mother's recipe, because he will carry that recipe on. So I am so glad that Sean Carter has that recipe now in his repertoire. Okay, so you can see this is what the dough looks like. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep working this dough, and it's just going to start to come together a little bit more. Don't be afraid to keep flouring the surface. And it will stop being sticky. You can start to see as I push into it what it's starting to look like. And as I do this, I always tell people that, I know you can have pasta machines that roll things out and do that, but I love this part. I wouldn't give this up for a machine to do. I do realize some things may be a little bit faster, but this part of rolling the dough out is really one of my favorite parts. And so I'm going to turn now to my rolling pin as I start to shape this. And as I roll this dough out, what do I think about? What do you think about when you roll out dough? Who thinks about different things? What was that? Yes, what I think about is I think about the people that I had a meal with. You know, often last time I had made pierogies, or who's going to have these pierogies tonight, or whatever it happens to be. But I usually think about the people when I'm preparing food, and that always makes me happy. So I don't know if we have any more of those pictures of my family.
I think so. I think our producer can get those up.
So while
There
I'm
we go.
rolling, let me tell you a little bit about. Okay, so here's my mother. She's on the picture on the right. She is in the blue dress. This was, of course, at a wedding, if you couldn't guess that. She's in the blue gown. And of course, the picture on the left is when she was growing up. She's in the front row, second from the right, so she's in the dotted dress there. And those are her siblings. She came from a very large family, 13 children in the family. She grew up in a coal mining town. They saved everything and did everything with very efficiency. That's her pulling cinnamon rolls out of them. And if you recognize the apron, okay, so my mom was also a great seamstress. She made everything, and she never let a scrap of anything go to waste. So guess what? The apron is two-sided because you got to have the Christmas pattern for when it's the holiday season. All right, so that's a little bit about my family. There is one more picture there, which to me is a favorite picture of mine because it's of my mother and father. And pierogi production was a production. Of course, you can make pierogies all by yourself. But cooking in general is always more fun to do with someone else.
Of course.
So let's get, is the pot boiling?
Let me turn that on.
Okay, let's get that. I'm not going to roll this dough out completely because it will take me a little bit longer. What I'm going to do is just share with you how you fill these. And so you can use a cutter, a pastry cutter of sorts that does that. You can use a pizza cutter just to slice, or you can just use a knife. But in general, what I do, I'm going to trim off a little bit of this. So I'm going to try to make this square. Normally what I would do is I would take a little time to make this even with the dough. And then what I do is I cut enough to fold over the dough. That's what I do. Make enough to fold over. So I make these more like what someone might think of with raviolis, only because this is faster to do it this way. Now, when I do this, I usually just go right down the line and fill these up, and then fold the dough over. And I'm going to show you the way that I seal these up, because you don't want the pierogies boiling, the water when they're boiling, to have the insides come out. So what I do is use a little bit of water. Actually, I'll just put it right in here. Use a little bit of water, and I just run it around the edge. And that just helps make that surface just a little sticky. I run it right between. Again, makes it sticky. And then I just fold the dough over. And then you just break it off into the pieces, and that's it. And then you can, when you cut them, use a pizza cutter, use a knife. Of course, you can use something that will seal them as you do them, but if you don't have anything, you can always use a fork, which is what my mother always used. Just pinch them off like that, trim off any excess you might have, and then these get dropped into boiling water. And that's how you make the pierogies. The dough is a kind of a no-fail dough, as long as you work it. I mean, it always seems to come out just right. The prune filling, same thing. Now, I will tell you that the pierogies you are getting are actually in the traditional pierogi shape, which is like a crescent shape. And that is because the chef recognized that was the traditional shape, and so he prepared them that way. So kudos to what I now say Sean is I declared him Polish. It's not quite ready, so we'll let that sit there. So what I'm going to do, we'll drop those in just to show you what they kind of look like. What do they say? A watched pot never boils?
Yeah.
Everybody shut your eyes. Don't look at the pot. All right, so what we're going to do, did you turn this on?
I turned it just low. Do you
Okay,
want it?
let's turn up a little bit higher.
Okay.
I did make some pierogies last night. I made 2 batches last night. One that we ate for dinner, and then another one just for the show here. And what I did after I boiled the pierogies was I put a little bit of butter on them, and then I put them in a container. Normally what we do is we would take these pierogies, and once they're boiled, and it doesn't take that long to boil them, like 5 minutes. They'll start to float, give them a few more minutes to cook. And then you take them and you'll put them in butter. Now, some people will put their pierogies in butter and onions. We don't do that. That's not what this recipe works with. I don't even know if it would really go well with the prune ones. I haven't tried it. Sometimes the pierogies don't even make it to the pot with the butter in it. They just start to be eaten right away, which is also fine. But in any case, the pierogies go into a buttered pan, and you can cook them here really just to get a little bit more butter on them. You can cook them to give them a little crisp if you want them crispy. You can really get them to be kind of dark if you wanted to. Sometimes browned butter, just do a browned butter, and you can pour it over top of them too. But in any case, it's a pretty simple recipe, actually. It doesn't take that long to make them, and it is a family favorite. So we do make them around the holidays. That's when my mother used to always make them. But actually, I like them at any time, and they are good. And you're nodding; they're good. So, how many people here have had a cottage cheese or a dry curd cottage cheese pierogi before?
Bob's favorite.
Oh, there you go. How about prune? How many has had prune pierogies? Yes.
Dry cottage cheese is another name for farmer's cheese. We've got a different kind of cheese.
I use whatever cottage cheese there is and just drain it. And I used to be able to get the dry curd, but I have not been able. Well, I should say, I actually don't do the shopping. My husband does all the shopping. And no matter how many stores he goes to, he can't find the dry curd cottage cheese. But
So they asked to repeat the question. It was,
oh, it was,
it was about why use the dry curd or where
why,
to get it?
was it farmer's cheese?
Oh, farmer's cheese.
Is it farmer's cheese? I don't know if farmer's cheese could do it. I think what you really want is the dryness. So I just don't know if farmer's cheese, yeah. You might have to break it apart. You may need to then, like, break it up, almost like a feta, that kind of, if you break it up, I would say, look at the amount of egg that you're putting in. And you might want to maybe add 2 tablespoons of butter.
No, I just saw it in the ethnic store, like the European store over here on that.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think people are saying that they've seen in farmer's cheese in a lot of the stores now. It's kind of a popular cheese to use, so would it work? Yeah.
is that what you're,
Yeah, my Bob's uses
Farmer's
is
cheese.
it drier? Is it,
Just a little bit. It's dry, but you have to put more egg in it. She puts egg in it.
yeah, the egg. Yeah, so if you use that drier cheese, then adjust the amount of egg and adjust the amount of butter. You just want, and again, if I can come back here and take a look, you want the consistency to be something like this. You really don't want it to be any runnier than this. That would cause them to sort of
Okay, we're
come out.
boiling now.
You're boiling, so let's just drop these in. Oops, I can see I need to pinch that one off. And, you know, again, what you'll see whenever we put these in is you will see that it doesn't take them too long before they start to float. And then once they float, just give them another 5 minutes or so, a few minutes. It doesn't really matter. Actually, I may let, and if you break any of them, you know, just don't worry about it. You know, the dough is the dough. In fact, that one's probably going to break because I think I didn't seal it well enough. The dough is still fine. And once you put some butter on it, it's butter, salt, and pepper. It's still fine. Yeah. So, but I try not to crowd the pot. That was the one thing I will tell you: is don't put too many in. Take your time. Let them boil. Let them come to up to temperature. Now, this darkness on the pierogi is something my family loves. Is that kind of dark and crispy? But there are plenty of people who prefer them to look the way that they look in the serving dish I have back here, which is really just boiled with a little bit of butter on top of them and warm. And it's either way. They make a nice presentation if you add a little bit of fresh parsley. I'm going to take these out of here. If you add a little bit of fresh parsley and sprinkle those on top. This is one of those dishes that in our family, the pierogis go fast. They really go fast. I'm sure that must be like everybody else. So this is, sometimes people will put for their pierogis sour cream on the side. Sometimes people will serve them with, like I said, with onions. My family doesn't, but there are lots of ways to prepare. We can turn all of these off, I think. There are lots of ways to prepare these, and so this is what pierogis look like in the Gabadlo and King household, and now Engel household. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I always enjoy cooking, as my husband knows, and I love to talk about food, so this was perfect, Tamara. So thank you.
Great.
And even better for me is when I have people in my kitchen while I'm cooking, either helping me or just talking to me. So 3 things, perfect. This has been a perfect evening. So
Great.
I'm happy to
Thank you
answer
so much.
questions if
Yeah.
anybody has any.
All right.
Yeah, let me get the microphone over to you here.
I was curious, when preparing it for like a large family gathering, 18 or 20 people, if you're making it, say, 4 or 5 days before you go to the water and the butter, can you freeze them?
It's one of those things we've never gotten to that point where we froze them. I think you could, because it's dough and they're filled. I think what I would do first is I would boil them first. I think I would go ahead and boil them, cook them, and then refrigerate them or freeze them after they've been boiled, rather than the dough like this. That would be my recommendation. And again, I think that if you're making a lot of them, that's the way I would do it. And if you are looking for ways to make to shorten the time it takes, if you have a pasta machine, use the pasta machine. Do the things that make it easier for you to make them.
There was another question, I think, here. Oh, over there. Okay.
I was wondering if the prunes are canned or dried or
Yeah.
fresh. I've never seen prunes before, I don't think.
Oh, I should have brought have you ever seen dried apricots? So if you've seen dried apricots, there's usually the dried prunes are near that section, or the dried plums, which are the prunes. And they're usually in that kind of a container or a canister, sometime if you get more of them. When I made the prunes for a batch, I used one of those small bags, and chopping those up. That produces about 3/4 of a cup maybe 3/4 of a cup to a cup of paste. And that's what you need for this. So that's about what you would use. Yeah.
One of our favorite places to eat pierogies in my dad's hometown of Allentown makes them deep fried. Have you ever tried them like that? They're
I have
delicious.
I have not deep fried pierogies. But this is a good time just to remind people, there's a lot of dishes that are made around the world where you have dough and you have some kind of stuffing in it. And the dough might be a little different, and the stuffing may be a little different, and even the mode of cooking it might be different. Raviolis, these are more like raviolis, but you have samosas, and you have, dumplings and empanadas. And so all of these different cooking methods are things you could do with this combination. I haven't fried this dough before, so I don't know how well the dough would hold up to frying. So that would be the one thing I'd want to sort of maybe check out first to see if the dough fries up well.
Okay, I think we did have one
One more question up here. Here, just a second.
Did your ancestors do just the butter, or just the boiling? All my family only ever boiled them. They never put them in butter.
They have always put them in butter, but I don't know. It's interesting that you say so you would boil them and just have them boiled after.
Yes.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that, because on Monday I had gone to the dentist, and my dentist, pierogi conversations are great opening. If you're ever looking for a conversation starter, say, what's your favorite filling for pierogis? My dentist told me that his family, he's from Poland, originally from Poland, his family never put them in butter unless they were the day-old pierogis. So if pierogis made it to the second day, then they put butter in them. Otherwise, they boiled them and ate them just as they were coming out of the water. So that's what he told me. So I do think, again, this kind of final touch could be anything. They're cooked at the point you take them out of that boiling water, so they're done at that point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. This has been terrific. And thank you, Tamara, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Yep. And you're welcome to have a pierogi when you get a chance.
We will. All right. All right. So we are going to reset again and get ready to make baklavah.
Would you like help?
Let's see.
Thinking just about all the cuisines that are out there that use stuffed dough. And I wanted you to maybe think about while we're transitioning here, what other kinds of recipes are you familiar with that, or maybe ones that are your favorites that used a form of stuffed dough? Ravioli, yeah, that's definitely one.
You can leave it. Sure.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Tortellinis.
Tortellini for sure. Anything else that you can think of?
Yep. Thank you.
Dumplings, yeah, definitely. And we actually, one of our World Kitchen episodes was dumplings.
Beer rocks.
Beer rocks. I'm not familiar with that.
Dough with beef and a cabbage filling.
Yeah. We have another one over here. Come around and got you.
I was going to say, in a way, I think tamales are the same thing.
Yeah, that non.
Yep, tamales. Somebody had mentioned empanadas earlier too. Those are actually great. Tamara, what's our next World Kitchen episode coming up?
Coming up in July, it's a really interesting one. It's going to be Once Upon a Pesto. And so it is all types of pestos. And if you're like me, you probably think of pesto as something made with basil and pine nuts that you see regularly. But I've learned from our guest chef, Jessica, that pesto just means crushed in a mortar and pestle. So there's so many different things you can make as pesto. So we're going to learn about all of those, a fruit pesto and some others.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
All right, let me bring some more of my stuff around here.
How many people here have watched a number of our World Kitchen episodes? That's fantastic.
Great.
And for those of you who haven't, you can find all of the episodes on our website, so you can go back and watch them at any time. So if you haven't had the pleasure of doing that yet, definitely check that out. It's a great selection of cuisines from all around the world. And this is how many months have you been doing this now?
I think we have 21 or 22 episodes archived.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it started out as something that we wanted to try, to try to stay engaged during the pandemic, and we really have a fantastic following of folks who have discovered it, either from the very beginning, have stuck with us from the beginning, or have discovered it, since then, and have really been entertained and, educated by lots of different recipes around the world.
Okay, so we are going to make baklavah. And everybody thinks baklavah is so difficult to make. It's really not. It's just a little bit tedious, and you have to be careful with the phyllo pastry. I do not make my own phyllo pastry. I buy it at the store. And I will tell you that today, when I went to get my pastry, they did not have the one I was used to. So I got here to make the one we're going to, take out of the oven for the magic of television in a few minutes, and realized that I had to kind of do something a little different than I normally do, because this one is shorter than I'm used to. I'm used to the longer ones. So that's fine, because phyllo pastry is not only very light and delicate, but it's also very forgiving. I mean, if you put enough butter on phyllo pastry, it melts together, says, thank you very much, we'll take it from here. So don't worry about that. So what I needed to do, which I'm doing here, is I'm melting my butter. This is 2 sticks of butter. Baklava is not diet food, but it is worth it. So let me just double check real quick and make sure this one is doing okay. All right, we're going to turn that off. I think we are. Or we may just take it out. Hang on. I think we'll leave it there for a minute. Turned off. Tony, while I'm doing this, could you see if you can figure out how to get that to turn off? It's not turning off for me. All right, so we're using melted butter. And the first thing we're going to do is get our nuts ready. So what I have in here is probably about 4 cups of walnuts and about a cup of pistachios. Then you're going to add to that cardamom. And cardamom is what gives it a very distinct flavor. I think it's what makes it one of the specifically Persian baklavahs. So, and I don't recall exactly, I think 2 teaspoons or something was in the recipe. Again, like everyone else, I kind of look and put it what I think it needs. And I just love the smell of cardamom. And then we're also going to be adding sugar to the nuts. So about half a cup of sugar, I believe is what it said. There we go. And then we are going to use our food processor and pulse it. And this needs to be fairly well mashed up, but you do want a little bit of tooth to it, as they say. You want to be able to taste it and chew it. And that should just about do it. So what you'll see is kind of some of it looks like grains of sand, but you have some bigger pieces in there as well. So that's what you want to see. All right. Now, my butter is about melted. And where did my brush go? Let me see. I know I brought another one, so we'll use this one. All right. First thing we're going to do is put some butter on the bottom of the pan, and that is to hold the pastry down when we start. So we're just going to brush it all over the pan. Here we go. I'm going to use a lot of butter on this. All right. And I have used every kind of pastry brush when I make my baklava. I've used the silicone ones. I've used the ones that are natural hair, horse hair, I don't know what it is. I've used those, and anything will work as long as it's going to hold that butter and get it on your sheet. Okay. Now, as I said, this phyllo pastry is a little different than I'm used to. Normally, I would do my sheet long ways and just pull it along my sheet. Because of this being so short, I decided the best way to handle it was to do 2 sheets sideways. So, in order to get this to lay flat, I kind of pull it over the rim of the cookie sheet. So I pull it until it is where I want it. And again, don't worry about it because, like I said, baklava is very forgiving. So because this is a little too long, I laid it that way. I'm going to put a little bit of butter on the edge here because they're going to overlap. And if your phyllo pastry is sticking together, which happens, don't worry about it. And it's not terrible to just throw out a sheet or 2 because you've got plenty in a box. So I put those on. Now I'm going to more butter. Every single layer gets buttered, and this is the tedious part. And now because of this, I'm just going to lay this one over and lay this one over to flatten them out here. And then put a little more butter on that. Yup, lots of butter. Have you ever seen a croissant being made? That's a lot of butter. This is about just as much. All right. Now, the way this package was made, there were 2 packages, which is nice because it will dry out if you're not somebody who works quickly with your pastry. If you're a little bit slower, I would suggest that you use a damp towel or a damp paper towel, not wringing wet, but just slightly damp, like dry your hands on it or something, just to keep it a little bit moist. I tend to work pretty quickly, so I'm not too worried about it drying out for me. Oh, I forgot to turn those over. There we go. Again, I'm not used to having to do this, but it'll be fine. It'll look wrinkled, it'll look a little puckered. Don't worry about that. Pull it down. You just want to make sure you get plenty of layers between for each part of the baklava. So this is the bottom. We'll do the same thing on top. This was actually the very first World Kitchen back in October of 2020. We did baklava and Persian tea, and it was very popular and got us our start. So because that one worked well, I thought, well, okay, let's try another one. And we just kept trying another and another. Because it was the pandemic, and we couldn't allow people to come into my house, which is where the regular World Kitchen is made, I pretty much did the first few myself. Finally, vaccines came out, and we were allowed to have people in the house, so that's when I started calling all of my friends and started bringing in chefs from other countries, which was always the intention, but we just didn't know when we were going to be allowed to do that. So we got that going, and it's just been one thing after another, and I keep telling everyone I'm overwhelmed by the way that I used to have to call all my friends and say, would you do this for me? Now people are calling us and saying, I'd like to be on World Kitchen. So that's been really, really nice. If you know anyone who would like to be on World Kitchen, let us know. We do film here in State College. And there we go. I am not Persian. My husband is. And so that whole last name of mine, I married the whole thing. That's all him. And so we've been together for about 38 years, and so I've been making Persian food for about 38 years, and that is our company food. You know, when you have company over, it's always Persian food for us. I will say also that I've traveled to Iran several times with my husband and my kids, and it's amazing country. It's beautiful. If you ever get an opportunity to go, if things ever get better, please do. But my family there, while they make amazing food, you know, all the different rices and the shish kebabs and the different stews and salads and everything, none of them bake. None of them do sweets, because sweet shops are on every corner there, and it used to be relatively inexpensive. So nobody learned to bake all the things they do. So when my husband would say, oh yeah, you know, Tamara, she makes her own baklava or her own cream puffs or whatever, they're all really shocked and surprised, because none of those ladies know how to bake. And much like, I believe it was Lisette that was saying, for every Persian woman I've watched cook, there's something a little different about the recipe. So even down to the rice, you know, do you put the lid on while it's boiling or don't you? Do you, how much butter do you add at the end? You know, I really like to mix it up and add things to mine that aren't always very traditional, but I think it works. And that's the fun thing about making international foods, you know, trying something new. Try it the traditional way, and if there's something about it that doesn't resonate with you or your family, do it a little different, make it your own. Okay, we're getting close to this first layer being done, and as you will see, that's been a lot of butter.
Something that's, you know, that pastry, is it easy for you to use? Is it because you've done it a lot, or is it generally pretty easy to work with?
It depends. I will say, you know, I buy this in the frozen section, and it comes frozen, and it says that you can leave it out on the counter to thaw or thaw it in the refrigerator overnight. I've done both, and I do think that the slower thawing in the fridge helps the pastry to stay the way it's intended to be. Sometimes if you try to thaw it too fast, I think the ice crystals inside kind of I don't know, do something and make it a little mushy and it starts tearing, and it can be a problem. Okay, I think we're going to call this the last level for this. Push it over.
Tamara, one of the questions we had was how many layers are you doing of that pastry?
Well, yeah, so as I said, some of the boxes come with 2 packages like this. If that's the case, you would use 1 package for the bottom and 1 package for the top. If it doesn't, if it's a one package deal, and the bigger sheets usually is what I find with those, then you just kind of eyeball it. I would say a little bit more on the bottom, and so a little more than half on the bottom, and then a little less on top. Okay. So this is our first layer, or first level here of the phyllo. Now we're going to take the nuts and just dump them on there. And I do save a little bit to sprinkle on top because that makes it look nice when we're all done. There we go. Now, a lot of people have asked, can you use other nuts? And of course you can. This recipe, what makes this more Persian, is the pistachios, the walnuts and pistachios. Of course, there are many, many countries in the Middle East that claim baklavah, much like tabbouleh. And so, the Turks, the Lebanese, everybody makes baklavah. And they all are just slightly different. Maybe it's different nuts, maybe it's a different seasoning or spice. As I said, the cardamom makes this what it is. Also, the syrup that I make it has honey in it and lemon juice and rose water. Not all of them use rose water. Okay, so we've got that on there. And now we're going to move on to the second layer. Again, you're going to try to put a little bit of butter on your nuts. It's going to soak in, but it's really hard to get this layer to lay down initially because it doesn't have anything to hold on to. The nuts aren't as sticky as that butter was on the bottom of the first layer. So we're just going to try to do our best here and make it work. Okay. Some of you are trying your baklava already? All right. I hope Sean got it right. Okay. There we go. All right. Going to keep going. So by about the second layer, it starts to lay down a little easier.
Does anybody have any questions for Tamara while she's doing this?
Yeah.
So the question was, what is the phyllo dough made out of?
That's a great question. I could dig the box out and look. It's just, it's a basic dough. I'm assuming it's flour, flour, salt, water. It's just very, very thin. And, I know some people do make their own, but I can't imagine trying to make something this thin and intricate.
Anybody else? Questions?
If your dough breaks, let's say it breaks this much, okay, no problem. Just put some more butter down, lay it right on top. It's not a problem.
Tamara, you get your spices from overseas, right?
I do. My husband travels back and forth quite a lot from the Middle East, so he will bring a lot of the spices with him. But like for today, I did just go ahead and pick up some cardamom at the grocery store. I mean, I will say if you have an international market anywhere near you, you're going to find that you'll get your spices a lot cheaper. Some of the name brands, who won't be mentioned, do charge an arm and a leg for certain spices that you can get in an international market much cheaper. go.
And some of those spices, are fairly unique to certain cuisines, right?
Right.
And I know you've said to me before, your kids kind of prefer it in certain ways, maybe less traditional than what would be traditional baklava.
Well, yeah, because the traditional baklava, as I said, has rose water in it. So the one that you're tasting has the rose water. Could you tell? Could you taste that? Yeah. And it gives you the aroma as well, which is really nice. So the rose water is in the Persian baklava. My kids don't really like rose water. So anytime we make the sweets, they ask that I not put it in theirs. Now, if I'm making it for company, I'm going to make it the traditional way, and they're just going to have to suck it up and deal. But but for the most part, if it's just a family thing, especially the cream puffs and the things that they really enjoy, I'll leave the rose water out and just add vanilla instead. But I like the rose water. I like the flavor and the essence and the aroma that you get with it. Another thing that I do sometimes, which is not in this recipe, but if I'm just feeling it, I will crush up some saffron and put that in my butter, and it gives a little saffron flavor.
I think we might have another question up front. Actually, if you
okay.
say it, Lisette, I'll just repeat it for those.
I just wanted to know what your favorite recipe to cook is, like your favorite Persian recipe.
So the question was, what are your favorite Persian recipes? Did I get that right?
Yeah. Well, I will say that as far as the baking, I think the baklava is my favorite. For dinner food, I have a favorite stew. Persian food is very often basmati rice. Always you're going to be eating basmati rice. And then a stew or shish kebabs. I like the chicken shish kebabs the best. And my favorite stew is eggplant and beef and tomato, and it is just divine. It's a lot of work because you fry the individual slices of eggplant and tomato, and then you put it all together kind of like a lasagna with the meat sauce, but it's fabulous, and my kids all love it too. It's kind of the most requested among my kids. And of course, it's the hardest and takes the most time, but that's what they really enjoy. And then the other thing about the Persian, like I said, you're always going to be having the basmati rice. The way it's made, you get this crunchy, hard shell on the rice at the bottom of the pan. It's called tadik. And in my house, when the kids were little, my husband got all the tadik to himself. But once they got teeth and wanted it, he had to start fighting for the tadik. And now I have to break it up into pieces and ration it out because it's a fight.
We have another question over here, Tam.
Yeah.
So I'm not familiar with rose water. Do you make it? Do you buy it?
I bought this. You can buy this, again, in the international markets. It's cheaper, but the supermarkets here in town also carry rose water. If after the show, if you want to come up and take a look at any of this stuff, please feel free to do that. You can even smell it. It's got a strong rose essence. I know some Middle Eastern women who will wash their face with this in the mornings, things like that. So it's not only edible, but it's useful as well. All right. Now, prior to starting this evening, because we wanted to be able to do this all on time, I went ahead and made my syrup because the syrup, it's important that either the syrup be relatively cool and the baklava be piping hot, or vice versa. You can take your baklava out of the oven and let it cool down and then make your syrup and make sure that's good and hot. I tend to make the syrup ahead of time, let it cool down, and then pour it on my baklava after it comes out of the oven. The syrup is actually sugar, water, honey, lemon juice, and rose water. So that's what went into the syrup ahead of time that I made so that it could be cooling. Now, the next most important thing about making baklava is that you have to remember to cut it before it goes in the oven. If you do not cut your baklava, you are going to get a big puffy mess and it's ruined. And you will only do that once, believe me. So, the traditional baklava, of course, is a diamond shape. You can also, if you don't want to try to maneuver that, you can make them just squares. I tend to start at one corner, and you kind of have to hold the pastry down. It tends to want to pull up a little. I use a very sharp, pointy knife, And I start at one corner and I go all the way down the diagonal to the other corner. Start again. However big you want your pieces. I tend to make them an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter. Keep going all the way. And it's the side pieces that are not going to be the perfect shape that the kids and the husband get to eat. And the beautiful pieces are for the guests. So make sure that you are going all the way through that bottom layer as well. You can feel it. Your knife kind of digs into the pan, which is why I have designated baklavah pans, because they are all scratched up, but they are the baklavah pans, so they don't care. All right, then I flip it around and do it again. Start in the other corner, and this is where it gets a little tricky. It does tend to want to pull up. I think I probably could have used a little more butter on here because it's really trying to pull up now. Either that or my hands are just incredibly hot, which is probably true too.
The question was, did you have any butter left over after doing your layers?
I did not. I used all the butter. That was 2 sticks of butter. It's unsalted, yes.
We have another question here, Tamara.
So this is on your syrup. So I've had Turkish and Greek baklava before.
Mm-hmm.
I like this version better because it's less sweet.
Yeah.
So how much less honey, sugar do you not put in as compared to those?
Well, I think what makes it less sweet is the lemon juice, adding the lemon juice, and the rose water. If it's only sugar and honey, or only some only use sugar. So if it's only one of the others, you're not gonna. It's gonna be pretty sweet, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about this one is that the lemon juice makes it not as sickly sweet. Okay. Okay, we're going. The first time I went to Iran and met my husband's family, we got off the plane and went to his mother's house. And one of the first things they said to my husband was, "You lied to us. You said your wife was American." And he said, "Of course she's American." And they said, "No, all American women look like Linda Evans on Dallas. They're tall and blonde and, wear evening dresses." And he's like, "No, that's not how that works." All right, so this is what it would look like now. You've got your diamonds cut. And this is where we would put it into the oven. I'm going to put this over here. And yes. Oops. Let's get the one out. All right. So this one went in the oven just as Renata was starting her recipe, and this is what we've got. So now we're going to take this cooled syrup, and we are going to pour it over the baklava. And because the baklava is very warm and the syrup is cool, I know you can't hear it, but if you were closer, you'd be able to hear this. You can hear the sizzle. It's sucking up the syrup now. And I do try to be careful with my syrup because if you put too much syrup on, it can get really soggy on the bottom, and you don't want that. You also want to kind of tilt it to make sure the syrup gets to all the parts. A little warm. There we go. All right. So now I would let this cool on a cooling rack for probably, I don't know, maybe an hour. And at that point, once it's nice and cool, then you can put, if you want to serve it right away, of course you can. Otherwise, you can put some parchment paper over the top and then lightly wrap it in some plastic wrap and keep it in the fridge. And this will keep for a good week in the fridge, as long as you keep it wrapped. And the parchment paper just keeps the plastic from sticking. The last thing I would do here, again, is if I've saved some of those nuts, I would just sprinkle it on top to make it nice and pretty.
Tamara, while you're doing that, we did have a question that was asked, can you use Caro syrup instead of the sugar?
I don't know. That seems really, really sweet to me. I've never tried that. Give it a shot and see what you think. It seems very, very sweet to me, but it's possible. And you know, you don't use too much sugar in the nut mixture, like half a cup for all of that, because you are using the syrup later. So everyone has now tried their baklavah? Yes? All right. Okay. Well, it is very warm under these lights, let me just tell you. Okay, thank you very, very much. We love celebrating cultures and cuisine and our friends and neighbors at WPSU. There's this cooking competition coming to PBS this summer. It's called The Great American Recipe, and it premieres on June 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The series will run through August 12th and will feature some amazing chefs from all over the country. This brings us to the end of our special evening here at World Kitchen, and I would really like to thank Renata Engel and Lizette Garcia for sharing their prized recipes with us. Let's give them one more round of applause. And if they would like to come up and come out, Lizette, come on up. Renata, come on up. Thank you so much. And once again, July 17th is our next World Kitchen, all about pesto, so I'm sure you'll want to tune in. Check WPSU.org/World Kitchen for that. It will be our regular Sunday 2 p.m. Zoom on the 17th. And thank you, ladies, so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.